We go back in time to the early days of the apocalypse as we get a little backstory on Lydia. Though with her, it really is more like two truths and a lie. But the real question is she really that damaged? Or just deceptive? Plus, Henry is the new Carl. On this week's The Walking Dead, Season 9, Episode 10. Omega. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of The Walking Dead. So, standard spoiler warning applies, and I forgot to turn the heater on out here in my studio tonight. So, it's a little chilly. That's why I'm wearing the jacket tonight. So, if you catch any breath coming out of my mouth, it's just special effects. We're adding new layers of storytelling here. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, let's dive into this week's episode. And look, I'm going to say straight out, this was a really good episode. Riveting, I think, from beginning to end. And part of that, I think, really played into our flashbacks, our early days of the apocalypse. I love seeing this stuff. It's one of the things in Fear the Walking Dead I don't think they had spent enough time on before they sort of moved on with the storylines and everything. So anytime we get some moments here where we can see how people are reacting in these early days, in these early weeks of the apocalypse, how the world is reacting and sort of falling apart, since Rick was kind of in a coma for the first 2 months and missed a whole lot of this part in Walking Dead itself. It's always enjoying to sort of see how the degradation of society really sort of occurred. And I think that's one of the high points definitely in this week's episode. Lydia telling the story, getting our flashbacks to these early days, locked in the basement, and the parents sort of debating what is it that we're going to do next. Especially, we're starting off, I think, was day 23. So 23 days since stuff went down, and really, panic is already setting in. People are freaking out. I mean, again, that's 3 weeks. It's a good long time, really, to not know what's happening and how long they've actually been inside this basement. Has it been 23 days? Are they just counting out from there? It doesn't really matter so much as just sort of, again, conveying those early days ideas and seeing how everything is sort of falling apart. And they did a really interesting job with these flashbacks is, again, like I said, Lydia's backstory is two truths and a lie. Some of it's actually happening, but some of it really isn't. And I think they played with those ideas really effectively, showing us sort of multiple visions. I mean, even some of the early stuff when she's talking about her dad getting killed, we kind of see that first moment and he has a beard, and yet then she tells another tale, well, he's cutting it off because he's going to do things his way, which doesn't sort of match in with that flashback. So even as we're catching these, we are seeing that things are off. Things aren't consistent, and I think that really is a great driver of the storyline and lets us know from an audience standpoint that we can't totally trust everything that we're hearing with Lydia. Now, one of the interesting comparisons we get early on in this episode as Lydia and Henry are sort of trading stories back and forth is an incredible similarity between Carol and Alpha. I mean, in many ways. I mean, one, look, they're both parents with a small child, with a daughter, really. Both were in, at least apparently, abusive relationships. And yes, Alpha's story does sort of change and switch around, so in many ways we can't be certain of some of this, but at least as it's presented initially. Both are, kind of in abusive relationships. Both ended up, fathers end up dying. But really what seems to be the major difference here is while Carol had sort of a supportive environment and group around her as the world fell apart, for Alpha, very much did not. Much more panic-oriented, much more of an area where she had to sort of step up early on. So in some ways, Alpha is kind of a dark version of Carol, kind of like what might have happened with Carol in different circumstances, because both are incredible fighters, both are incredible survivors, both are willing to do what needs to be done to survive, willing to cross that line. Though for Carol, it does seem more of protective and supportive of the environment of the people around her. And in many ways, if we learn through Carol's story, is a lot of that badassery ends up being acts that she regrets or shakes and recovers from. When the whole Terminus thing went down, when she did that super badass singular ninja go in and take Terminus out and rescue everybody. When we had the following Carol episode, she reacted, she needed that moment to step back and kind of gather herself. Whereas Alpha seems very much not in that sense, a much more darker character. So, again, it was just a really interesting to see how those paths differed. I mean, one thing also, Carol didn't really have to kill for quite some time, whereas for Alpha, that was, day 43? I think we started off on 23, seeing the panicking starting to set in, and then I think it was day 43 where the guy sort of violently freaked out and tried to get out, and we have Alpha having to choke her out. You must be quiet. We're seeing that kind of change in with her there. So when we had and again, it's little differences. We've got the whole beard cutting thing that seemed to be happening with Dad. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna live my own life now. And then later on, with the change, we find out that it's her that's cutting her hair, and she's finally gonna do what she needs to do. So again, sort of interesting, darker switches, but I just found it really interesting, especially as we sort of see this developing relationship between Henry and Lydia. I think, and I'm expecting at some point, we gotta have an encounter between Carol and Alpha. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to play out. So yes, as I had mentioned in the opener, in this storyline, the part of Carl will be played by Henry. Yes, look, I have to say straight out, I'm not super familiar with the Whisperers storyline in the comics. I had sort of started petering off of my reading that. Again, great story, just so much stuff to do, not always all the time to do it. So I'm not super familiar with all the specifics inside of this storyline. But one thing that I do know is that it was Carl that was connecting up with Lydia and sort of developed a relationship, and I don't want to go into too many things that might be spoilery right here, but it does appear that Henry is now starting to sort of take that role. And I think that's a great use for the character. I mean, one, his connection with Carol gives a nice connection there with Lydia, between Lydia and her mom and Henry and his second mom right here. But this is also showing sort of a growth for him, somebody where he's identifying with another youthful girl out there, someone more closer to his age. It's an early connection on here. We get sort of relationship and budding sexuality and all those themes kind of developing right here. But also sort of a bit of wisdom, experience going on. I love the fact that we've got the two of them bonding, and we have Daryl outside listening and gathering information. And what does he end up telling Henry later on? It wasn't just him, it was him and Tara, and they had a rotating group. And yes, leave them down there, get all the info that you can. Until Henry crosses the line, starts to reveal information about Hilltop. And then, boom, doors fly open and Daryl's coming down. And be quiet, stupid idiot, what is it that you're doing? It's great. It's tactically smart. It gives great storyline. It shows that nobody is being stupid and forgetting about little things. And it's cluing Henry into the idea of what it is that's going on. Is that, yes, look, getting information is one thing, but you can't trust this person. You can't be telling about about Hilltop and what we have and the kingdom and how far away it is. You can't give away all of this information. It's tactically unsound. And it starts to, and from there we get the sort of little development between Henry and Daryl, which I think worked so well in this episode. Between the two of them, it's a great build right there. It's a great connection. It's a great evolution of character, and I really enjoyed the way that they sort of bridged that out. We're letting Henry sort of play this role, get this information, but he's not being left alone. And then, of course, he ends up getting brought into it, and that's where things start to really flourish. Now, as for Lydia herself, she is one broken individual. I think that's what sort of the conclusion Daryl arrives at. And she certainly behaves well. I mean, again, this is a brilliantly done episode. There's not a lot of action. It's really all character work, but I think it's really, really well done character work. Lydia looks like a caged animal this entire time. She's hiding in the corner. She doesn't really engage. She's held up everything close. Once she does have an opening, she lashes out. It's played incredibly well. And I think that's what carried all of these moments, really carried this episode out. And I think the whole arc of this kind of big discovery, I think, happens as soon as Daryl comes down with the switch. And there are many choices this week, and I will touch on them all. But I think I'm still going to put this one up as our Seed of the Week for this week. And reason being is, while there are a lot of great following sequences, I think this is the one that kicks it off. It's also, I think, one of the strongest moments that we've seen for a while from Norman Reedus. Because it's not big, it's quiet, it's storytelling. But there's such an intensity, I think, behind it. But also, there's an intensity and a softness and understanding. He manages to hit all of these layers within this little speech as he's talking to Lydia, slowly pulling off the smaller branches and the leaves and stuff off of this switch. And if any of you are familiar with the switch, then you reacted just like Lydia. You recognized it immediately as he was walking down. And that was sort of my question is, why do you have a switch? What are you planning on doing with it? Because there wasn't a feeling like he was going to go in and beat on Lydia with it. But it does sort of bring up everything really well as she's talking about how dads beating their kids and they're just looking for excuses to beat their kids. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're the ones that want to be there when you're scared, so they'll make you scared so they can be there to sort of comfort and be that controlling figure. I mean, really sort of painting these different abusive relationships. And then just in the midst of that real, just laying it out on her, that was in great stories that you're telling about your dad, and how much of that was BS? How much was any of that true? How much of that, again, gets her to start sort of opening up on that. And there was such an intensity to that. And again, like a caring, like really kind of reaching out, trying to find out, what's going on with Lydia, because those bruises when she tried to attack, that's from someone getting beat. And that's something that Daryl is aware of. Which is awesome, because following up into the subsequent scene there, where Henry now has been listening to that conversation going down in the jail, and he sort of confronts Daryl about it, where we get this brilliant backstory on Carol and why she's got this short hair. And the fact that it's taken so long, where now she's finally comfortable enough in the world around her that she doesn't have to have that level of defensiveness. I mean, it's said in the Zombie Survival Guide by Max Brooks, if you guys have ever read it, talks all about short hair. This is not the way you want it in the zombie apocalypse like this, because you're trying to escape, and this is where walkers can grab and pull you back. So in a way, I always appreciated Carol from the very beginning, because it seemed like she was already set for the zombie apocalypse. But that's because of her husband, because that hair can also be used to grab and slam heads and throw you around. You know, it's an easy thing to grab. So the fact that Carol did that as a defensiveness against her abusive husband is brilliant. And it also shows that she's now in a place where she doesn't have that same fear. It just took a long time. But being able to turn that around onto Daryl, that he knows so much about switch and abusive parents because that's what Daryl has been through as well. Again, it was nice. There were moments between Henry and Daryl that were they were perfect. It's a great evolving relationship, not only of strength, but of trust and of vulnerability. And again, most of these were also standing up like, is this the scene of the week? Is this the scene of the week? They're all good. They're all excellent character-driven moments. And sure, that spurs on Henry to now be allowed to go down and reconnect with Lydia. And I was wondering, is this part of Daryl's plan? Or is this Henry moving too fast? And of course it is part of Daryl's plan. They're working together now. That's great. Concerned about pulling Lydia up into the world and showing her around Hilltop. Again, not trusting what she's saying because so much of what she says is a lie. Do you really want to give her this type of intelligence on the layout of the lay of the land and what's where and all that? Gross bonding moment between her and Henry with the worm. But again, a perfect insight to this is the world that Lydia is growing up in. So incredibly different than Hilltop. And I think that's part of what is useful to break her down in this. That's part of Lydia's brokenness. Is she doesn't believe that there is any reality, there is any hope out there. We walk with the dead because it's their world. We just have to live with it. Any places with walls, they're not going to survive. I mean, through all this, you're seeing the justification that has been laid into her on why things are this way. And of course, there's good reason not to trust her because she's reaching for Hammer, you know, as Henry's trying to show her around. And what's there, you can see she's planning that escape until the baby. If there is not a surest sign of a stable reality, it must be kids in the Walker apocalypse. Because you can't be screaming out there in the land of the dead that will bring them all in. If you can have a baby reacting like that, then, and again, another just brilliant scene of those flashbacks and those moments and just what's real, what isn't real, what has she changed in her storyline, what is the panic that's all involved, and suddenly realizing I have to get back. If there isn't a stronger reaction to a caged animal like this, that aspect of freedom and the world falling apart around must get back to safe, secure cell area that I know. It's just, really enjoyed this episode. Have I hit that point that I have? And then from there, then we get more of probably the truest part of Lydia's story in this entire thing is the fact that she knows is a lie, probably always knew it was a lie, but that story, her past, was a lie she needed to believe in to maintain some sense of reality and compassion and love and connection with a parent that was weaving this story, these lies over and over again in order to control her child. Simply abuse of a different form. Abuse of truth and reality and belief and love. That's the relationship that we have between Alpha and Lydia. One completely constructed of lies. But can we still believe Lydia at all? Is this still a deception? Because certainly we find out that the idea that they'll just move on without her, well, that's not true at all. So yeah, the B story this week is, of course, with Magda and Nico and the new group wanting to go out and look for Luke. Well, I guess really in a way opening up with that search for Luke, though with Tara initially as part of the Hilltop group. And this is, I mean, that's really the evolution, the kind of acceptance all around of being part of the group is kind of really the main flux of what happened with their storyline. Did love the opening bit, though, when they are with Tara and they do sort of discover the horses and everything. Super smart. Again, they're already now aware of the Whisperers and already changing their tactics. Watch the hands, look for knives, watch the tracks, see what's going, it's just very smart. And again, we're seeing a very well-handled group being able to take out all those walkers. They don't rush it. Each one does their own thing with throwing knives and the bow arrows and the wrist rockets, which I still love. It's just such a brilliant choice to see with the decaying bodies. This is the way to do it. Anyway, I love the opening sequence. I love that search. I love Tara's reaction. Tactically smart. We know they're out there. We know that there's got to be a lot more of them, because Lydia said that there wasn't anybody else, and now we have horses that have been cut and bled to lead walkers. We know, therefore, that there are more of them. Are there 3? Are there 300? We have to step back. So again, the group's smart. They're doing tactically smart things. And I love, again, we've got with Magda and Nico and everyone wanting to go out and find Luke. This is a relationship, this is a commitment to group and the people around you that's a perfect fit for Hilltop and Alexandria and the rest of our group here. They just, again, have to sort of blend in, and them going out and then coming back in and just realizing we should have asked, we shouldn't have just wandered out. And Tara's reaction on that too, not an angry thing, not something like Maggie would probably react strongly, but more along the lines of, look, I'm making this up as I go along too, I'm trying to figure this out. Just, if you're going to disobey me, just talk to me first. Again, there's no competition here. This is everyone figuring out. It's a great relationship being built, and I really enjoy seeing that. And that leads perfectly to our end shot. And look, I know I said last week that I'm not that scared of the Whisperers. Not the way that they had handled them. This is, however, wonderfully creepy. How they're just walking normally, but in a group, almost like a military parade there, as they're all walking together, and they all turn, and they're all heading towards Hilltop and looking down, and just creepy because they look like walkers, but they're moving with purpose and decision. It's just, and then we have Alpha coming out, not just a mom with cut hair, but the shaved head, the dirt, the little scars and stuff, almost looking like a decaying walker herself, even without the mask. And just stepping up, and I am Alpha, and I'm only here for one thing. It was just, that's scary, that's disturbing right there. And that's really a direction I hope they continue, because that does make this, I think, make the Whisperers so much more impactful as characters, and more disturbing, I think, that way. Because now, not just individually or walking with the group, now they're like that, but walking with almost military precision together. I thought was just brilliant. And again, Alpha looks super creepy, so much better, so much scarier, I think, than when she had the mask on. Alright, so I think that's pretty much going to wrap up everything for this week. Now, the one thing we didn't see was Negan and his return back to Alexandria. I was really hoping we'd at least get sort of a shot of that. But I was also glad how they did this focus here. And so it may not be till next week, or possibly even the week after that. It might be a little while before we actually check back in with Alexandria, depending on how much I'm just going to be really focusing on the Lydia Omega interaction and storyline going on right there. Which, like I said, totally fine with. I thought it was great to have this episode focused in dealing with what they did. So I can't wait to see what happened with Negan. but I'm happy to wait as long as these storylines keep going. So next week looks like we got some negotiation going on. Looks like Omega or Alpha. Why do I keep doing that? That's the name of the episode, not the character. Looks like Alpha there is to get Lydia to get her daughter back. So we may be having a trade going on. But if we know anything about the world of The Walking Dead, none of that is going to go smoothly. So if they keep this quality up, if they keep this level of intensity, I can't wait to see how the rest of the season ends up. But that will wrap us up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me with this review. And as always, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, you know where to toss them. Down in the section below. What do you guys think about this episode? What are your thoughts? What was your favorite moment? And how much do you think we can trust Lydia? Let me know. Throw those down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Please subscribe if you're not. We got so much going on. We got the rest of Walking Dead. We're just about to wrap up The Gifted, but we got American Gods coming out next month. Game of Thrones coming out the month after that. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. returning in May, and in the summer we're going to have Legion and Preacher. Oh my God, so much stuff. Don't miss any of that. You want a subscriber? Do that by clicking this button right here. And I'll throw up a couple of our latest reviews right there, and you can go and check those out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.